How the Etins Came to Power James. Tick-tack, tick-tack, said the grandmother clock in the clockmaker's shop to her children and bachelor friends. The symphony of ticking and tacking was endless here. It began a long time ago when an oily liquid was smeared to their cogs and wheels. It had made the clocks feel deep pleasure. They had felt both young and beautiful again. This was, for the grandmother clock, exactly 31,536,000 tickings or tackings ago. She turned to her left, felt the cracking of one of her smaller cogs, and said tick once more. She hungered for more of this oil. On that very same tick, Mr. James' inner cogs went on a minor berserking spree as he decided to move as far away from where he now lived as he possibly could. This happened just a few meters above the grandmother clock, who now started dinging and donging to signal the hour of midnight. Dinging her dong was one of her favourite things in this world, so she usually did this all night long. James quickly packed his belongings, mostly consisting of old clothing and cash, and started consuming the oil inside his lamp to illuminate his surroundings. And as he did, his inner cogs came to spin and brought forth an idea. He was going to travel to Azerbaijan. A friend of his had travelled there 86,400 minutes ago and had wanted him to join her. She had left with her crew to go work on some invention. Or was it an archaeological excavation? Or maybe it was a more unspecified scientific expedition. James did not recall the details. His friend was the academic type, and he was her opposite. But he knew she would give him a job in Bibiabat, if he recalled correctly. He found comfort in the thought that in a place so far from Switzerland, he would not hear the ticking and tacking of time all the time. Many times passed for James, first towards and then in Azerbaijan. Although he never noticed a single one of them, for him time was now naturally fluid, more like a wave than particular points. However, he kept counting time as he measured the gradual fattening of his wallet. He had found work at his friend's excavation site as planned. It was hard, physical work. He had to refuel his body very often. His mind, however, had all the time in the world to conspire and think. It developed a habit to tell him stories revolving the strangeness of the other workers, who to James had strange habits and a sharp, alien language. His friend from Switzerland was the only one he trusted, but she was never with him when he was with the other workers, digging and cutting and lifting. They pointed at where they wanted him to be. Because he did not know the language, he could not be of more help than that. His status among the workers was low. One day, James worked with nothing in his mind. He had not a single thought about anything at all. Deeply occupied with his here and now, trying not to overheat and faint while the sun burned his already half-dead, lobster-boiled skin. Suddenly, he heard a call for help. He heard a call for desperate, immediate help. Nothing more. Nothing made the yelled-out words feel strange or uncanny this time. He hurried to help and found that he had to keep a huge and heavy stone from falling down upon a fellow human. His back and arms kept the stone at bay long enough for the one in need to help himself out of danger. Although James' burned skin was bursting, bled and fired off some nasty sensations at his neural highways. Later, at dusk that day, a group of workers came to thank him. This was the first time James approved their contact. It was a summer's eve, and the sky was even more red than James. They uttered strange words combined with suspicious smiling, pat him on the back so he had to brace himself from the pain, and then left him again. In his hand, he now held a smoking cigarette. The smoke made him very dizzy, and it tasted foreign. James's wallet grew huge. His lady friend paid him well for his work, and that made him very scared. His mind now manifested stories about theft. He saw evil in the eyes of the other workers, as his low-status work at the dig site paid off better than the others. After a sleepless night with strange dreams of dying, James took his wallet. Actually, it had grown into a big sack of money and went for a walk. He was looking for somewhere to hide it, a place where only he could find it. At the horizon, there is a mountain peak that resembles a fist, James thought, as he observed his surroundings. The peak would look like something completely sinister from any other point of view, or in any other light. It had just found its way to James' retina as a gigantic rock fist. An invitation seeded its comfort in him as his mind's eye saw the hand opening to welcome him over. This was the place he was looking for. It was a tall mountain that no one would risk climbing without a very specific errand in mind. And no such errand but his existed on any of the peaks in this area around that time, James concluded. The mountain began rising closer than mountains at the horizon usually do. In fact, he could begin the climb in just one step, since the excavation took place at the bottom of a dried-out river, in the midst of a deep valley. He just had to start elevating the steep slope. As he ascended towards the sky, it turned black, and stars peeked down at him and all of existence. A cold wind suggested James to rest and ground himself a bit. He sat in the soft moss, enjoying the fantastic view while thinking about life. The comfort was huge. There was a certain kind of feeling here, a kind of profoundness. It made James realize that he was a prisoner. He was stuck with an upward gaze in a metaphorical sense. He looked up towards his next payment, up towards his future possibilities. Parents, they make you look up at them. Later, they make you look up to a teacher, and then it is the boss who takes over. It never ends. But James ended it. He decided to look downwards instead. That is what the parent must be doing, what the boss most certainly does, and the teacher too, he thought. So he never saw the starry vastness in its full amazement, because all James now saw was the valley, the dig site, their tents and machines. Slowly he sank deeper into the moss. He grew, and so did some strange black goo that was leaking out from the moss. all night passed, the dark, thick liquid was alive, and it touched his skin. It caressed him, whispered to him, and slivered, slowly soothing him to form a symbiotic relationship. When the morning sun's first rays hit the forehead of James, a wakefulness came upon him. He decided to venture no further up the peak. Instead, he went back down again. He had no appetite for his sack of coins and paper anymore. He now knew that the only way to be safe was to become full of power, more powerful than anyone else. He descended in body, but his mind stayed at this high mountain ridge. He was gigantic, a powerful feeling. It made his fears fade away. Nothing could hurt someone so huge. It lasted 8,544 hours. It was a vigorous time for James. He never had to work hard at the dig site anymore. In fact, he was now the boss of a growing workforce. Their language was now his. He now earned a full year's salary in just a few or more days. A married man he now was, with his dear lady friend, the ineradicable inventor Lise Meitner. He had explained to her all about the black goo he had found at the height of his mountain, but mostly he bragged about being large in a lot. He had cared to listen a while when she described a petroleum-fueled world with machines doing everyone's hard work. But in the end, we will need a more stable source for this power, she had told him. She believed that the hunger for oil could be more than addictive, and sometimes she mentioned a thing that's called fission instead. This talk angered James, since he could not see it. Confused as it made him, he lessened in size, so that was the end of such kind of talk. James's work squad set out to separate the mountain peak that almost looked like a fist from its surrounding others. The expedition was doing very good overall. Lise had focused on building a machine that could suck out black goo from the ground. The goo had proven widely useful already, mostly when burned in peculiar ways. Her next step was to invite some inventors, financial leaders, and other more powerful people. Then get the product out on the market and pump harder and elsewhere as well. James knew not about that. He concentrated his will on the mountain. It called to him often, asking or sometimes commanding him to set it free. Let me enter the veins of your kin. Let me grind the gears of your world. Let me warn Mother Earth. Release me. Hurry up now, James Young. Such were some of the words that it gave to our night, most often both all and every night. This very night, however, he was awake and felt a dark, deep and growing blackness of holes from his stomach. The overwhelming awe from his trip to the mountain lay flatlined and dead. It slowly gravitated inwards towards an infinite emptiness of dread and despair. A wave of anxiety washed over his body. It scalded his senses as he fell, tiny, horrid and terrified. He could not lead any more. He was such a small, unimportant spit of a shit. His team of workers would with no doubt commit mutiny and throw him deep into the abyss of eternal nothingness. Finally, sleep came with its dreams. There was beautiful vastness of space, and a comet as big as an ocean. It shattered upon entering Earth's atmosphere and smashed down at several places at once. The entire planet was burning, and life was no more found where the sun shone its light. How the Eitins came to power the planet. A golden coin, asked the man at the highest position, responsible for heaving the rope to himself. The team had a pause, and the man had left his place at the contraption to sit down in the moss for a while. The coin he had found was a valuable one, like money to him overall. He found yet another one, then another. Soon he had found the sack that James left behind. But not only he, there were two other men, and they looked like they wanted to fight for this loot. So the first man attacked, and the others joined in. The punches flew wildly around. Someone cracked his nose and another his fingers. Then a strong one blew holes in the air that made him slip on the moss, and the others joined forces for a moment to ensure that the fallen stayed down. The ground leaked its black goo all over the fallen, who came into a frenzy and pushed one of the others over a cliff. The two now remaining went on in full fury. They got covered in black liquid smear. Down in the valley, there were also some fighting, although as of yet only verbal in form. It would soon lead to a killing. James told his wife of his nightmares and horrors, but Lisa did not want to listen to such kind of shit. A dream is a dream. It was only a dream, so get up and go on with today, she said. She felt the strangeness in James, and she saw that he had lost his hammer. It became the main target of the argument as it spun out of control at an accelerated pace. James forged a false hammer, but it did not fool her. He tried all he could to radiate confidence and strength, but as he repeatedly failed to ensure her, he became desperate and frustrated. So he hit her in one last attempt to show might. But such might is maleficent and not even slightly majestic, so she took off her ring and it landed on him. That was enough, and he drew the gun he had held in his hand under pillows. She got hit in the head, and the noise that it made just grew as it roared its way out through the valley. It then suddenly crumbled. It twisted and fell. The mountain peak that looked like something alive was now so. Huge pieces of stone fell to the ground as a horrible Eitr awoke from a long loss of self. It lay a spell on the humans of the valley at Bibiabat. A spell of possession it was. The effect was the same as for James, forever in hunger for something more than what is, something to fill up and empty inside. The Eitr ate their innards, and it looked like when a fat person feasts upon oysters at New Year's Eve. It left only the shells. However, they still looked like humans. The Eitr was now stuffed for the coming 365 days. After that time, the inventors, financial leaders, and other more powerful people arrived. The Eitr sat quiet and motionless high up the mountain. It looked only slightly like something else, then a cliff or a rock, but never enough to bring itself into anyone's hag. The shell of a man who once was called James bade the arrivals welcome with a false kind of warmth. He then held a visionary presentation. It sold the idea of their product, called petroleum. First, the receptors were very uncanny by the lifeless look in the eyes of their puppet hosts. But the powerful presentation that had been prepared by Lisa long ago made them see way beyond all of that. The Eitr was now just outside of the building, and it quietly swallowed their hamingers too, while manipulating the invisible threads of the other former workers, now zombies at hand. It replaced the hamingers of each and every one of them with its own seeds, spem-like, hungry, twisted serpents that clouded their cognitive horizon. The impregnated shell of these people left the valley of Bibiabat with blueprints for machines that could suck out the oil from the earth. With a never-ending hunger, they now spread far and wide, and a golden era of plastics and automobiles took off like a rocket to the moon. Within them resided the Eitr's small children. Each night, these mares left their host to go feed on the hope, courage, and willpower of anyone who still had some. The offspring slowly grew while the humans diminished. They knotted together in small, secret groups, biting each other's tail to form swarms of baby Eitr's. They learned how to lure and catch prey as they surveyed the humans from within. Some of them formed a gang that drew energy from the humans' fear of death. They invented machines that upheld life long after living had ended. Relatives could now keep their old ones alive for a long time if they paid the Eitr's grim price. The elderly's lungs went up and down, and their MRI showed a splendour of nothingness. It looked promising to the humans and brought them in some hope of eternal life. However, this made them even more scared of dying, and the vipers within the infected was eager to take a bite of that fear. Death became something that gnarled but was hidden, and even the dead got some makeup pre-burning. As soon as a human felt terror inside, the small Eitr's spawns fed on its courage, love, and hope. Another group of Eitr brood formed a hungry alliance. Their tactics made the humans eat like never before. Their business model mimicked their own endless hunger. They poisoned the crops with Eitr. It yielded gigantic harvests, but insects and other animals shunned it like a pest because they saw that it was empty. The emptiness was its effect. When someone ate from an Eitr-filled product, they became stuffed for just a short while, and when the hunger returned, it was a bigger hunger than before. In that way, the neophyte Eitr youngsters of this group ensured an ever-increasing profit. The humans were loving it. Yet another swarm of serplings did skillfully master the art of cradling the filth of a human's self-image mirror. It confused the target to feel unworthy, impure, contaminated, and even suicidal. This bothered the group that had specialised on the fears of death. The groups became intense competitors. To hide their filth, The infected human usually painted its body with layers of makeup. Yet the mirror felt cursed to these people, and it showed them nothing but utterly deep, gut-twisting ugliness. The serpents profited from everything they could make a human do to compensate for this. When the target no longer loved itself, it needed love endlessly from others. It was a never-ending hunger. There came to be many successful corporations like this. At one hand, they helped humanity thrive, since everything got so easy now that they had oil. But on the other hand, the groups consumed the humans and used them as fuel for the many growing Etins, their never-ending hunger, and of course their ancestor Etin of Azerbaijan. In due time, the ancient Etin had left its valley and fared across the sea. The water turned black and gooey when it submerged, and thus its current name. The Etin had made its way to the Buseji Mountains, where it stood at the top, spying westwards with vast vision over Europe. Sometimes it blew a special kind of flute that sent orders across the ether to all of its children throughout the planet. Its offspring kept bringing gigantic blot offerings to their parent, mostly consisting of yummy hope, courage, strength, willpower, empathy, joy, and love. All with human origin. The offsprings themselves had just enough to slowly keep growing, while the old Etin had the time of its life. It grew very big from all the humanity it ate. Sometimes it performed powerful ceremonies, and it birthed many mighty spells, and even new spirits that would influence the world for eons to come. One newborn spirit had the power to traverse the membranes that separate the multiversal layers from each other. It called itself Nihiratsmeth and refused to serve the Etin. It just slipped away to where no Etin could ever bring it back. The Etin filled huge stones with sperm and tossed them up, puncturing the firmament, and left them wandering off into the vastness of eternal space in every direction, even in the direction of time. The Etin was a magnificent sight at the top of its golden hill, and humanity kept growing in numbers as their willpower dozed off. The end of the world. Some Edlings disagreed about the majesty of the older Etin. As food became more and more scarce for both the inhabitants of the physical plane and the ones residing at other levels of existence, they became more and more territorial and hostile towards each other. The Etins' youngsters had grown into complete Etins themselves by now, and had an endless hunger of their own to unfill. The world of the humans was about to collapse. As they plunged into chaos and war with each other, they fought desperately about the right to suck the few drops of oil that had not yet been pumped from the ground. Some of the Etins now refused to put nourishment into the hands of another. So behind the old Etin's back, they took all for themselves. The Ancient One knew, and it blew its strange flute in hate and in rage. It blew so hard that the flute bent and broke, and the Atlantic Gulf Stream slowed down for a bit. Among the Etins, the sound made the weak ones explode or spontaneously mutate and cripple. The entire world dwarfed a little. The old Etin had by doing this doomed its world. The old Etin knew that they would come, and it watched as the humans cannibalized desperately on each other. Everything knew that only one can win when the price is everything on the planet. Three of the Etins gathered in a French coastal cave below the gaze of their parent. One of them, Jaume, circled the area, making them undetectable in every way. Shoggoth, another of them, started by whispering its thoughts to the others. They could use the underground caverns to travel in stealth, all the way to the Buchegi Mountains, where they would find or make an exit, and the Etins blind spot and strike both first, hard, and very fast. Exxon, the third of them, added that it could fill Shoggoth's caverns with oil, making way for Jaume to do a quick, slivering attack with no need to find a blind spot in the Etin's awareness. Jaume was eager to be the one to do the killing and voted yes, while drooling of Eitr. However, Exxon concluded that the Etin had no blind spot, and Jaume said that their meeting could not last for much longer. The Etin's all-seeing eye was already burning through its cloaking spells. Shoggoth agreed. It did not like the idea at all, but thought that if Jaume would fail, it would at least have one less rival to worry about. First, the young Etins rested while the old one was freezing. Since the Atlantic current ran slow now, there was a winter like never before. From France all the way to the Buchegi Mountains. The old Etin had not eaten in a long time. And then, with the speed of a wind, Jaume tumbled forth in the underworld below ice, rock and snow. Shoggoth made sure that the path was cleared and liquid, while Exxon distracted the Etin by stirring up the winds to incredible strength and pushing them over the mountains up towards the freezing one. Jaume erupted like a volcano up from the depth and aimed a bite at the throat of the Etin, but the Etin saw it coming and showered Jaume with fire. The flames went down as Jaume flew up, and they missed each other. An instant later did the oil ignite beneath them as the Etin's head flew off. The flames imploded down the tunnels. It spread all the way from the eastern Buchegi Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean in the west. And then the mountains exploded in one gigantic collapse, and everything between and around ruptured forever. Shoggoth fled down in the ocean while Jaume was caught and killed in the explosion, along with the ancient headless Etin. Exxon took off to the north. The huge wall of fire made smoke like nothing before. It spread across the world and ignited many lands, and the smog generated in the process blocked the sun for 3 very cold years. When the clouds finally faded and the ice melted a bit, there were dead Eitr pieces all over the globe. As they also melted, they birthed beautiful green fields and even some trees. There was no Eitr forces left in the scattered remains, only the beauty, love and truth it had swallowed. The Eitr's pineal gland melted to a squirrel, and its eyes birthed a new humanoid species. One where each individual had a sharp and special eye for insight, so that they could see if anyone hosted a parasitic Eitr again. This people are all Odin's, and they are the authors of their existence. They are willing to overcome any fear. If it hurts, they do not mind. If they fear, they do not mind. As they go about their daily life, it may not look like much, but they are in Valhall, making conscious decisions, carefully and responsibly considered choices about everything they do, say and think. In the deepest of oceans and at the most northern part of the pole, silent and sleeping, the Eitr's wait for the next time a Ginnunga gap will once again swallow the world, at the next Ragnarok. No matter how complete one may be today, the Eitr's always remain at the outskirts, waiting for any mistake. And sooner or later, someone may forget again. End note. The cover image may look like oil inside the earth, where the Eitr's rested for such a long time. Or it may look like the asteroid that carried the Eitr's here. Although it is actually an image of Phytophthora infestans. Why that is my riddle to you. The Odin of this saga is Ernst.